Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I am your host or co-host this evening, alongside Rafe. We're happy to have you here. And Rafe, how are you?
Harry, I'm fantastic. Last time we got going on, it's all about producing airflow across wings, and then I got distracted with the Wright brothers and their engine, and it's been a wonderful.
So you're saying it was a typical Bufnagle episode where we start on one topic, we go to a tangential topic, and we attempt to make our way back.
We're going to get our way back. I know we will, and I know who's going to follow us, Harry. The world's greatest listeners are going to follow us the whole way there. We are an intergalactic top 10% podcast. As usual, you can reach us at bufnagle@bufnagle.com.earth. Milky Way. Remember to share the love, share the buff, give us a 5-star review, and hit subscribe or like. Your podcast machine allows you to subscribe and automatically get downloaded the Buff Niggly content that you deserve. Tell a friend to listen and you get a free episode. Hit the buy me a coffee button and I'll buy Harry a coffee.
There we go. Eventually we're going to have to go to Bufnagle season 2. And I don't know if we're going to be Bufnagle the podcast or if we're just going to be the Buff.
Maybe we could even drop the definite article "the" and just be Buff. Not even the Buff, just welcome to Buff, and it just be a thing.
Oh, well, they'll have to do a whole nother episode on the etymology of the podcast titles.
Yeah, well, we'll get there.
We're doing our classic "get distracted."
Okay. Oh yes. Okay.
Here, so we're actually right on topic then.
Yes, we are on topic because this is everything. Topic is it's all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. So, all right, the Wright brothers are getting ready to make an airplane. They've made an airplane. They have an engine to power it, right? But they need a way to move the air.
Okay? Yeah, I would imagine just the engine churning cylinders back and forth doesn't really do much.
Yeah, it's just spinning a crankshaft. That's not going to get you where you need to go. Okay, so, and we talked about the www.wright-brothers.org website. Okay. And again, from the website, we talk about Charlie Taylor building the engine in 6 weeks from scratch. I can't even make bread. Yeah. Right. In a bicycle shop.
Mm-hmm. Underwater.
In Dayton in 1903.
Oh, yes, that part.
Uphill both ways in the snow. All right. Okay. So setting out to make their first set of propellers in 1903, the Wright brothers were astounded to find there was no scientific basis for propeller design.
Excellent.
Yeah, well, they had presumed that during the decades the U.S. Navy had been using propellers, they would have developed some mathematical theory for describing their performance, but the brothers could find none. The Navy's design method was simply cut and try. Now, we're going to have to get Brock on here to see if that is still how the Navy does these things, but unwilling to leave this important process to chance, in January of 1903, the Wrights built a wind tunnel. We can do experiments now. Mm-hmm. A wind tunnel slightly larger than their 1901 tunnel, and studied the performance of 28-inch long propeller designs, developing their own theory of propellers. Wilbur took the lead in this work, as he had earlier in the wind tunnel investigations, possibly the most important discovery. Okay, this is key. If you have your pilot's license, you have studied this when you study your propeller and your wings. Possibly the most important discovery he made during these experiments is that the propeller was actually a wing traveling in a spiral course. As such, it developed lift, but in a horizontal direction. So we talked about the rotors last week. Talked about the rotors top of a helicopter. They spin and they produce lift going,
upwards,
against gravity. But if you take that thing and you turn it sideways, now you're going to get lift in a horizontal direction. And
you're going to call a special word for that.
Yes, there is. And what is that word?
Thrust.
thrust. Okay, this force combined with the reaction of displacement of the air was thrust. Okay, so he talks about displacement of the air. That's the you're carving through the air like a drill through a piece of wood, but you're also producing lift there. So you're getting those two things together. It's called thrust. Okay, by February of 1903, the brothers felt they had a firm grasp of how the propeller worked. Wilbur designed and carved his first full set of propellers, 102 inches long. That's over 8 feet long.
Yes.
Two of them. And he designed them. He didn't, so like it's going to have this amount of curvature here and this amount of curvature here. It's going to be this wide here and that wide there. And they made these out of wood. Okay. Tapering from 6 inches wide at the tip to 2 inches wide at the hub. Wilbur determined that he and Orville would need 90 pounds of thrust to sustain the flyer in flight at 24 miles an hour. So they had done these tests with the wind tunnel and their little planes, and they could estimate how much lift they're getting from the wings and how fast they're going, and they could put that together. If one of us is on the plane and we have this much gas, we have our 100.
How did they build the wind tunnel?
I don't know that.
Where did they get a propeller to develop the wind?
I'll bet they had fans.
Probably a blow dryer and they plugged it in.
They had a bunch of blow dryers. They called their sister Doris. And she brought. Okay. When tested at 245 RPM, the props fell short of the mark. Wilbur determined that the reason was that the propeller pitch was too steep. In March, he began designing an improved propeller, and by June, he had carved 2 of them. One to turn clockwise on the right side of the flyer and the other to turn counterclockwise on the left side of the flyer. So if you see pictures of the flyer, there's 2 propellers and they're opposite wings and they spin in opposite directions. But the pitches are such that they both carve into the wind. Mm-hmm. And they did that so that the torque wouldn't develop. If they're both spinning the same direction, it tends to torque your plane in the opposite direction.
Do you remember taking off in your little Cessnas, right?
Yes.
Do you remember what happens if you don't apply any rudder?
It doesn't go nice and straight.
It doesn't go straight.
Yeah. It will curl, and you have to adjust that.
You have to apply right rudder.
Yeah. So that's because it's spinning the other direction and causing this torque to go the other way. The counter-rotating props would cancel the effect of any propeller torque that might have otherwise pulled the flyer to the left or to the right as it flew. The props were made of 3 laminated spruce boards. They were carved from wood, Harry. They were the same length as the first test prop, but wider at the tip. They were 8 inches wide, and they also adjusted the pitch. The brothers had no opportunity to test the props this time. They were consumed with other problems, like, maybe the engine seizing up.
Or their laundry was getting too wet.
That's right. And I got to go home and feed the dog or whatever it is. They were confident of their work. The brothers finally got a chance to test the propellers on the fully assembled flyer at Kitty Hawk. They tested the propellers once they got to Kitty Hawk. They found they produced a combined thrust between 120 and 130 pounds at 330 RPM. They are also remarkably efficient, converting 66% of their mechanical energy from the motor into thrust. I can't imagine. Okay, so I make wood stuff. I don't want to say all the time, but I spend a lot of time thinking about wood. I cannot imagine trying to carve by hand a thing that's never been made before. Like, it's a propeller, okay? It's 102. It's 8.5 feet long, and it's got to be like, and it's made out of spruce, and it's got to have a circle thing in the middle where you can attach it to the drive shaft, and it's got to have this. It's got this curve to it, so because it has to spiral out to the edge, and then it has to have the airfoil on it, and you got to and he built 4 of them in the first half of the year. He carved by hand 4 of those propellers along with whatever else they were doing. I was flattered.
You just didn't have to go to work.
Well, if that was your job and you loved it, and they had to do it because they were inventing the airplane. What else was it was in there? It was what they were called to do. Okay, so they didn't just do the airplane and flying and learn flying. They also did props and engines and all that stuff. Okay, now Wilbur and Orville were doing this around the year 1900. We all know what happened, right? 1903, December 17th, they actually fly at Kitty Hawk. Very strong headwind, which really helped with the lift. They go sliding down the rail and they fly, I don't know, it's 85 feet or 106 feet or something like that. It's a very small distance, not very many seconds, under 10 seconds, I think, but they had powered flight and they landed and they did a couple flights that day. The internal combustion engine was being used at this time. That was the kind of engine that Charlie Taylor had made. And they were all the rage for automobiles and airplanes and boats and all those things during this time. And planes eventually developed radial engines, Harry, where the cylinders weren't like in a line or a block or in a V even. They were like in a circle.
Around the outside. Yep.
Yeah, around. Right. Okay. And they provided better balancing and stability, but they were really loud, Harry. and they produced really rough flight. Okay. And about this time, by within 20 years, 25 years, people were working on the jet engine. Okay. Jet engines are completely different than cylinder engines, as the combustion, it took me a long time.
Them onto a jet airplane.
Well, yeah, you can't put a jet engine on a regular prop airplane.
That's right.
Well, you kind of can, but you can make a turbo. It's a little complicated. But here's the big thing. Okay, when you do an internal combustion engine, okay, you have a cylinder, and the cylinder the piston comes out of the cylinder a little bit, and then it creates a gap thing in the cylinder. Okay, and then you shoot gas and air in there, and then you compress that with the cylinder going back in. And then you light that on fire, and that produces a force to push that piston out. And you either have a 2-stroke or a 4-stroke engine, and people argue about all that all the time. But basically, you're burning the fuel, cleaning up, burning the fuel, cleaning up, burning the fuel, cleaning up, very, 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 very rapidly. And that is a discontinuous use of fuel. The fuel has to go in and then stop, and then go in and then stop, and then go in and then stop. Jet engines burn fuel continuously. And I had never, until I started researching this, I had no idea how they really worked. Okay.
All right. So tell me.
All right. So this linear motion of the pistons, like I said, gets translated into rotational energy with the cam and all that kind of stuff in the camshaft. Jet engines are different than, okay. Jet engine has three main parts going from most of the time, but not in a PT6 reverse jet. I mean, of course, whenever you can have a standard thing to do it, people come up with backwards ways to do it. Okay. Right. Most jet engines have three parts. They have a compressor, a combustion chamber, and a turbine. Okay. So think of the front of the airplane. There's the front of the jet engine faces where you're going. Okay. The air is going to come into this engine. The air goes into the engine by getting pulled in by a fan at the front. Okay, so there's a big fan on the front of this engine. And
Doris and her hair dryer. Yep.
Yes. So there's Doris, right? And she is, and you have to make sure she's got a parachute in case she has to jump off.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So she's there and she's pulling the air in with this fan, right? And it goes into a compressor. And this compressor, well, what does it do? It compresses the air. Now, this is not the compressor that's in your workshop. It's not a tank compressor. Okay. That thing works by having a little piston go back and forth, and it pushes air through a little door, and then the door closes behind that air, and then it pushes air through the door, and you build up pressure inside the thing. This works differently. This thing works by a series of spinning fans in kind of a
tapered way.
Yes, thank you. Tapered way. Starts with bigger fans and goes to smaller fans. And these fans have little airfoils on them, and they push the air forward, but that would start the air to kind of spin. But then there's some blades there that are completely flat that push the air ahead and stops it from spinning. So the air keeps getting compressed into a smaller space and starts moving faster and faster. Okay. So when the air goes in there through these fans, all right, and when it leaves the compressor, it's much hotter because it's been compressed. Okay. And it's under a lot more pressure, typically several hundred degrees and at least 10 atmospheres of pressure. This is a big compressor. This is not 90 psi working in your garage. Yeah. This is massive pressure here. Okay, so you take the air and you compress the air. Okay, but you're doing this in real time. It's not you compress it, put it in a jar, and hand it to the next guy. You're compressing it in a tube.
Kind of like these layers of air coming through.
Yeah. But the air it's moving and it's pressurized. So it's kind of a difficult thing to think about, but that's what the jet engine is doing. Okay. So the air is now hot and it's under high pressure and it's still moving through the engine. Okay. This hot compressed air is then fed into the combustor where combustion will take place. Okay. And there it gets mixed with jet fuel. Okay. So you have hot compressed air coming in, jet fuel coming in. That's going to be a very volatile combination. The mixture is, of course, set aflame, and that produces a lot of energy. And that energy and that explosion, that combustion produces even more heat and even more pressure. Okay? The result here is this exhaust at thousands of degrees and many atmospheres of pressure, and it goes screaming toward the back of the engine. This happens continuously. It's not like there's a chunk and a chunk and a chunk. It's just
like the screaming line drive in backyard baseball.
It is the screaming line drive, but imagine like it gets stuck in an infinite loop and it's nonstop. It doesn't scream and stop. It never gets to the outfield wall. It just keeps going. So this big, very hot, very high pressure gas, this exhaust gas is going out the back of the engine. But before it leaves the end of the engine, we're going to run that monstrous amount of energy through a turbine. Now, not the kind of turbine you put on your head. Okay. A turbine, right? Not a turbine, a turbine. Okay. It's going to turbine. And that gas is going to spin that turbine. That's going to do a number of things. It's going to create a spinning motion that you can use for whatever you want to use it. Maybe you could use that spinning motion to drive the fan at the front. And it's also going to decrease the temperature and decrease the velocity a little bit of that gas going out there. So that's what it goes through the turbine. Okay. You could also use that turbine, not a turbine. You can also use the turbine to power a propeller on the front of the plane.
Sure. Yeah.
You could do that. Now, note here, the important thing to note, and it took me a while to realize why this is so different, is that the combustion does not come in chunks in a cylinder, but is a continuous flow of air and gas. And, air and gas are coming in the front and fire and energy is coming out the back, right? And it's just a smooth thing. It makes a lot of noise, but it's a very smooth engine kind of thing. And keep this in mind. There's no need to spark the mixture. All you got to do is spark it one time at the beginning, and the next gas gets lit from the previous. It just keeps. You know what it is.
How does that get out of control?
Well, okay. I was reading about this. One of the first ones they designed, it got out of control and it kept running even when they turned it off.
Yeah,
and okay, it kept running because what had happened is the gas intake thing had actually leaked, and there was like gas everywhere inside this thing, and they had to wait for it to all burn off before it would stop. Right, but you're right. There are limits to there's some other limits too. Okay, so keep in mind you have high pressure air going into this cylinder, and at the same time you want to do what? You want to squirt something in there.
Right.
Okay, so that's the same problem as you have with a rocket engine. You have to put fuel into this place where it's burning, but there's high pressures. In fact, there's so much pressure in a rocket engine, it lifts a rocket.
Yep.
Okay, so that was the thing that was really amazing to me. All right, so you don't have to spark it. All you got to do is get it started one time. It doesn't go in little chunks. It goes continuous. The air and the gas are always going in, and the exhaust is always going out. The fan at the front of the engine does not typically push all of the incoming air into the compressor. Some of the air it just sends around. It sends it around that inner core, right, and simply provides an exit out the back. Because a fan is spinning, you can send air out the back, and that's going to provide some thrust as well. So there's really two components of the thrust. One comes from the exhaust gases blasting out the back of the engine, and the other one comes from the fan pulling air through there. And both of those things push the plane.
It's kind of like the fan is pulling the aircraft through the air.
Right. It is an amazing thing that they thought to do. I just can't imagine thinking this up. These guys, they had to have been out at the bar. It's like, hey, I got this great idea.
That's how all good ideas start.
How about we just keep burning it? Okay, so there's two men are generally credited with the invention of the jet engine. One is a guy from the UK named Frank Whittle, and he built jet engines in the UK, and he showed them to the British government, and they were like, yeah, we already got a plane engine. Why do we need that? So it took them a while to catch on. And the other was a guy named Hans von Ohain from Germany. Whittle actually built his engine and tested it in 1937, and it was first used in flight actually in 1939. He was able to get it on a plane, but it took a while for the Brits to figure out how valuable this was. Ohain's engine, I'm sorry, Whittle's engine was 1937. Ohain's engine was first used in flight in 1939. So Ohain gets credited with the first aircraft that used a jet engine. Whittle had the first engine.
Right. Yep.
Okay. Now, Ohain said he, quote, conceived the idea for jet propulsion in 1933 when he realized the great noise and vibration of the propeller piston engines seemed to destroy the smoothness and steadiness of flying.
I can't drink my gin on this plane.
That's right. So it was like, it's too bouncy, it's too noisy. Flying should be more luxurious and calm. And since that time, there's been all sorts of advances in jet engines about what you can do with how much air goes around the outside, how much goes in, how much. There are things like afterburners that you can add extra blasting at the backside. There's also burners. There's all sorts of wonderful things you can do. But after the war, Hans von Ohain and other scientists like Werner von Braun, right, the rocket guy, right? Mm-hmm. Right, they were brought to the U.S. under Operation Paperclip. Have you heard of that?
I have not.
They were like, what are we going to do with all these German scientists? If we leave them over there, Germany
they're going to do German things.
They're going to do German war machines. We want them to do U.S. war machine. So they brought them over. They said, you can come over here. And Hans von Ohain was one of those guys. He went to work, Harry, at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in
Ohio.
Dayton, Ohio, right, where he researched all sorts of things. Well, he just did research on stuff to make stuff go really fast. I guess that's the thing about it. He did
how many explosions can I put in this? Space?
Propulsion, right? He was like, that's what he would do. He would work on these kinds of projects, right? And he retired from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in 1979, and he took up an associate professorship at the University of Dayton, home of the
Flyers.
That's right. Okay. And he continued working at UD until 1992, after which he moved to Florida, where he passed away in 1998 at age 86. Now, I was at UD from 1983 to 1987.
So you knew him?
Well, from 1985 to 1987, I worked at the University of Dayton Research Institute. And among the things that I did, among the massive amounts of research I did while I was there, I was involved as an undergraduate in statistical models for estimating the probability that a jet engine turbine blade has a crack in it and needs replacing.
Well, what is the probability that the jet?
Well, it depends. They would. Okay, so this is the thing. Okay, remember, there's a turbine at the end of the jet engine. And it's spinning. It's under high pressure, high heat. It's spinning really fast.
A lot of stress
on those turbine blades. And they would the best way to test a turbine blade to see if it has a crack in it is to take the blade out of the engine, stress it, and where it breaks, that's where the crack was. And well, at that point, you're like, well, that didn't work very well. So there are other ways to do this, to test these blades. Right? You can do lots of different things in there, and but it's a false positive, false negative kind of thing. You don't want to test it and say, well, I'm very sure it doesn't have one, or I'm pretty sure you don't want to replace a blade that's not broken,
right?
And you don't want to not replace a blade that is.
Correct.
Yep. All right. So there's some statistical decision-making things going on there. And the guys I worked with had figured out all this stuff. My job was to write the computer code.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I did that at in the structural integrity division there at UDRI. And I was right down the hall from some other offices I think it was the propulsion group or something like that. Okay. And I remember every day I would walk down this hallway and I would walk past the offices and I would see the names on the doors. And I remember seeing the name Hans von Ohain. And I would always think to myself, well, that's a really German name. And that was all I would think, because I didn't know anything at the time, because I was a silly 20-year-old math major from a farm town in Wisconsin. All right. And I would sometimes see the man who occupied that office. I would see him in the break room, or I'd run into him in the restroom or something like that. And he always gave me a polite nod or whatever. He was an old guy, and he would just
Mhm.
nod and go on his day, and then he'd be back to his work. And years later, out of the blue, I decided to look him up, and I was blown away by the fact that I worked down the hall from the guy who invented the jet engine. Right?
Can you imagine if you decided to look him up when he was still there and you were still there?
Yeah.
What would you have asked?
I would have said, yeah, I don't. That's a really good question. I think I would have wanted to hear the stories. The stories must have just been incredible. Of those, like, well, first we had this idea, and then we had that idea, and then we did this, and then this thing blew up. So we did, okay. So as difficult as it was for the Wright brothers to get their plane in the air, I can kind of conceive in my head what they built. Okay,
Mhm.
I've seen internal combustion engines. It was a 4-cylinder engine. It had, there are pictures of it on the web. You can see the pieces, and
You can open up your lawnmower and say, like, okay, this is generally what happened.
Yeah, and like my mother, who's not a car gal at all. My dad and I were working on his lawnmower, wasn't starting, and she was like, oh, and she was right there. She like knew all the parts.
Mhm.
Right? These are things that are knowable to everybody. It's just a simple internal combustion engine. They didn't even have a carburetor on the Wright brothers one. Okay, O'Hain and Whittle invented the jet engine. Okay, if just seeing the pictures of them and the videos on YouTube and all those places, even that's hard to get your head around what they're doing. But I can imagine conceiving the idea, but then building, and it's a 3D thing, right? I mean, the pictures are all in 2D. You have to build this. There's tubes going through it and pipes, and it has to be
the
strong.
propeller's mostly 2D.
Yeah,
mostly.
It's a pretty simple. Like you can see how it works. The jet engines, like you conceived that idea, and then you were able to make. Like I don't know if they had their own Charlie Taylor, right? But they had guys that could machine the parts and make them. And this wasn't that much later. There's 1939, Harry, that they flew a plane with a jet engine, and so from 19 and he was. He died in 90, what did it say? 96?
98.
98 at the age of 86. So he was like, when he was like just out of school when he conceived this idea of a jet engine, and then he made it work. He like I have ideas in my head. I can't make them work. I have ideas in my, okay, these are like, I think you could take pretty much any breakfast cereal and use it to make muffins. Okay,
I'm sure you and Von O'Hain are.
Well, see, but that's the level of the ideas I can come up with. Okay, it's like, well, and not only that, but I've never made any muffins out of breakfast cereal. Right? He made a jet engine. I'm just floored by it, and he was just a guy, right? He was just a guy who sat in the office there, and he did his work, and he was a bigwig. I'm sure he was. But there he was, finishing out his life there, working for the Air Force, doing his stuff, doing research and propulsion. And I was just an undergraduate student making photocopies and writing computer code. And it was just amazing to me, a brush with greatness that I didn't even know I had until years later when I looked this guy up. It was fascinating to me. I
mean, imagine how many of those other brushes you may have had, like just in general in the past.
Well, yeah. Well, you work with guys that do fiber optic junk.
Yeah.
Right? Do you ever meet, like, are any of those guys important? You never know. You're like, the guy's a couple levels up, they're going to be higher up. Maybe you need to find a Hans von O'Hain of somebody came up with the idea to make a pipe out of plastic that you can use total internal reflection and send a beam of light down it.
Glass.
Yeah. Glass. Flexible glass.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So you never know who you're going to meet, and you never know when you're going to have a humble brush with greatness. And it's just, I think of that every now and then. People say, who have you ever, who was your brush with greatness? And,
well, I mean, everyone always considers like, oh, I met this famous athlete or this president or.
Well, your mom's story with the Queen, right?
Yes.
Okay, your mom's story with the Queen, and Zach has a story with Carrie Underwood, Mike Fisher, right? I mean, so like we all have these. Brett Paisley at the hardware store, right? I mean, so, but the Hans von O'Hain thing for me, that's he's right up there with Werner von Braun.
Yeah,
I would not be a good
absolutely.
German. So anyway, that's the story. That's how internal combustion engines generate propellers, and so jet engines push planes across the sky. And I just be grateful for all these guys doing all this work, and now we don't have to do it again. So
You just keep building upon it.
yeah, that's what you do. What do they say? I'm sitting on a recliner on the shoulder of giants, right? That's
that's right. I think that's a great lesson for us all to move forward. Kind of maybe sit up from that recliner off the shoulders of our giants.
Yeah.
But we should always remember to seek the good, live virtuously, and flourish, and enjoy the adventure of life. It's going to be a great day.